want to get started? We can do that.
Yeah.
Well, welcome everybody to the Looth group. Today we are joined by Wyatt Wilkie, who is an Archtop guitar and mandolin builder from Vancouver. Not from Vancouver, you're from
Vancouver Island.
Vancouver
There
Island.
was a lot of confusion with that. But
Yes. And he makes fabulous archtop guitars and mandolins. They're wonderful instruments. The players that play his instruments are among some of the best in the jazz world. Ed Cherry, who is, if nobody knows him, he was in residence with Dizzy Gillespie's band for ages, and he's a phenomenal guitar player, jazz guitar player. Ron Jackson, Ted Ludwig, Tony DiCaprio, among others. I think you've also embarked, which we'll probably take a sneak peek at a little later. You've embarked on a project recently to build a guitar for Jimmy Bruno and do a Jimmy Bruno model of your guitar.
right. Yeah.
That's not a secret, I don't think. So
No.
I'm not divulging anything, but we can take a peek at that later. So I wanted to have you on here, among other things, because we haven't had a lot of archtop builders join us for interviews and such, and I've been a fan of yours for quite some time. And since we not just because we haven't had a lot of archtop builders on here, but also because I've been fascinated not only with your work and your the quality of your guitars and the quality of your craftsmanship. But I also wanted to talk a little bit because you've had a different kind of path into Luthdom and guitars, quite frankly, than the average or the usual. You know, the approach or the kind of the unfolding of somebody's chapters into lutherie. Because you've been in this for about 25 years now, right? 25 years since your first.
25, 26, or more than that, really, because I started out making cases.
Right.
For Calton.
Right.
Long time. 1992, I think I started.
You started at Calton in 1992.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, at that time in the 90s, there were really kind of a couple of average or usual paths into lutherie. If you were traditionally self-taught, you read a lot of books, you kind of studied with somebody, you found yourself being able to apprentice with an individual and kind of, get the entrance into the forest that way. Or at that time in the late 90s, early 2000s, outfits like Roberto Venn were already around for 20 years, Red Wing, and Brian Gallup was already a decade into his school. So there was the common method at that time was the schools that taught guitar construction were fastly replacing the apprenticeship. And you got here by neither path. You weren't, you were.
I didn't even know about that stuff, to be
Well,
honest.
I know, and that's what one of the things that's fascinating. So why don't you unpack it for us? How you got started in lutherie?
I didn't even. It wasn't really a plan. I started working. I was a musician. My father was a musician, so I was just around musicians, music. It's hard to make a living.
Your instrument was mandolin.
Mandolin. My father played the mandolin. He actually made a living playing the mandolin.
And where was that? Where were you guys at that time?
Calgary.
Okay.
Yeah, he's from San Francisco, and he's because of the Vietnam War, he moved up. He was one of the guys who moved up with his band to Canada.
Okay.
With draft.
So what kind of music was a mandolin player in Canada, making a full-time gigging with?
Well, he started out in a bluegrass band.
All right.
He made the transition from that kind of psychedelic scene, San Francisco. He was a bass player, and I think it was because of Levon Helm he started playing the mandolin. What a cool instrument that is. started up a bluegrass band called the Northern Flyer, it was called. And they did pretty well around Western Canada. And then he eventually got into Ian Tyson's band. Or Ian Tyson, he's a legendary in Canada. Cowboy music, mostly.
Okay. All right.
Ian and Sylvia, maybe you've heard of Ian and Sylvia.
Mm-hmm.
He's the Ian from Ian and Sylvia. And then he started his own band playing what he calls cowboy Celtic music.
Okay.
He researched this, Western music and realized that, all these melodies, they come from Ireland, they come from Scotland. So once he got deep into that, and he's still doing it. He's still traveling, through Texas and Oklahoma, where they like that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. So he was a mandolin player, and that's the instrument you picked up.
Yeah, I picked it up, and then I played a lot. I played a lot around Calgary and Western Canada, folk festivals. I moved to Indonesia for 3 years. I played in a Malay band in Indonesia, Sumatra,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the greatest thing I'd ever done. Luckily we made recordings, so I still listen to them. We were a good band. It was interesting.
So what brought you to Indonesia?
My wife decided that she wanted to go there through a kind of like a Peace Corps type of a thing, but a much smaller organization.
Mm-hmm.
So we went over together, and we just ended up in this little town in Sumatra. She would teach, and I met these artists, musicians. We got this band together, and then toured, for a few years. The islands around the east coast of Sumatra, and it was a cool thing. I got to wear the traditional clothes. The music was quite traditional.
Sure.
Well, the melodies were, but the lyrics were actually quite revolutionary, because it was during a time when the dictator Suharto was still in power, but there was this revolution to bring him down.
Okay.
So we were part of that.
So you were a player at this point. You were truly a vagabond, going to far off places.
Oh yeah,
Go.
that's what I wanted to do. I never thought about making instruments, really. When I worked for Calton, we had a guitar maker there.
So were you in Indonesia before you wound up at Calton?
No, it was after.
This was after.
Immediately after.
So you were employed at Calton making cases.
Yeah. 4 or 5 years I did it. Yeah.
Okay. So music was in your universe as a player, and you got a gig, making cases, a day job, making cases at Calton.
Yeah, playing at night, in clubs and whatever.
Sure. Okay. So then you wound up in Indonesia, playing some funky music, and you were out there for what, you said 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, 3 years I was out there. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so where did making your first instrument come up?
Well, it's kind of started back in Calton, because we had there was a guitar maker in our shop, and her name was Judy Threet. I don't know if you've heard of Judy Threet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so she had her shop in our shop. So
really? Her guitar building was
right in there with us.
Manufacturing facility. Okay.
And she had what she called Doc's Acoustic Guitar Clinic, because she actually had her PhD from Stanford University in this philosophy. She was a doctor of philosophy.
Okay.
And her parents would be so proud that she ditched that and went into guitar making.
Oh, wow.
But it was just her call.
Excited that day.
Yeah. But she was so good, and I spent a lot of time with her, talking about guitars and watching her work. And we became friends. And so that kind of sparked a little bit, but I still wasn't really thinking about making instruments. And then in Indonesia, on this little island, Teluk Belitung it was called, and there was this instrument maker. He made gambuts, and it's kind of like a large mandolin.
What? Say that again?
It's a gambus. It's called a gambus.
Okay.
And it's a lot of traditional Indonesian music from that region. And I always came across players, gambus players, when we were out, our band was out playing, and I met a guy who made them, and I think that was the first time I thought, well, I could make this. I think I kind of trace it back to that.
Okay. And what about that experience of meeting this guy who was making a gambus? Now, a gambus was what kind of instrument is that? Obviously that's a traditional,
The stringed instrument.
and
It's
it
got a
is
skin on it. It's a weird freaking tuning. But I loved it. Oh, it's just a beautiful sound. It just really defined the music from that region.
right. Okay. And so, what about that experience got you thinking like, oh, I could make an instrument, whatever instrument it was. I presume you meant. I presume your opening gambit at instrument making was a mandolin, since that's the instrument you play.
It was actually a mandocello, my first instrument.
Okay.
And that, I don't know, I can't remember why, but we left Indonesia and we were like, where were we going to go? We kind of threw a dart at a map. And we traveled a lot, my wife and I. We traveled a lot. Like, we would go places to live for a couple of years. And we, like Indonesia and different states. And,
Just for the adventure.
And we ended up in
Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Yeah.
From Indonesia.
And that's where I made my first instrument. I was working at a cemetery. I got a job at a cemetery as a gravedigger.
Okay.
So I was digging graves, and it wasn't a bad job. I like the guys that I worked with.
Well, it's a different kind of case, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you were doing that over at Calton.
Well, it's funny. The first mandocello, the first instrument was a mandocello, and it was coffin shaped.
Okay. You're okay. Now, was that influenced by your day gig as a DJ?
I'm just highly influenced by things around me, I think. And I had no idea what I was doing. I wanted a mandocello. I just wanted one. So I thought, well, I gotta make one, I guess.
Okay.
So, and it was flat. I went to Home Depot. I got plywood. I think I nailed the neck on. I had nails where the strings would loop on the tailpiece.
Okay.
I inlaid kind of big chunks of turquoise.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea.
And so when you say it was coffin shaped, you're talking you didn't bend sides. You just had straight pieces.
It was an easy shape to make.
Okay.
Very easy.
Yeah.
And then, I played it, and it actually sounded really good. I mean, it was just a fluke, but it just had this big sort of like church bell kind of sound. It was just really big, and the strings were enormous. I kept it for a long time, and I finally just put it out in the garden last year. Dissolved.
as a garden.
As a scarecrow.
As a scarecrow. All right, so you made your first instrument, finding your materials at Home Depot and nailing it together practically.
It's embarrassing to talk about this. I just now realized.
Well, I don't think it's embarrassing. It's finding your own path, it's finding your own way. And what I'm curious about is how you got from there to where you are today. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of unpack this with you. So your first instrument, you managed to build a guitar or a mandolin shaped object, or a coffin shaped mandocello, and it didn't fall apart, I'm presuming, because it
didn't fall apart.
Yeah.
It was pretty beefy. The first mandolin fell apart. The first, I made a mandolin after that.
Okay.
And I was very proud of it. I thought it was a beautiful thing. I thought, man, I'm good at this. I am really good at this. And I opened up the case and just pring.
Oh my goodness.
So that was a little disheartening.
So at that point, I remember hearing somewhere from you that well, what I'd like to ask at that point is where when you decided that this is what you wanted to do. So you're two instruments in. You have one that managed to stay together, one that didn't last. How long did the mandolin last?
Oh, a week.
So
I don't know, something like that.
from there, as you were starting to figure out your way with making these things, what was your guide to what was going to keep one of these things from flying apart at the seams? Did you start looking at other instruments? Did you read anything? Did you research anything? How did you get?
Yeah, well, I had Bob's book, the Bob Benedetto's book, because
Okay.
I was making cases for Bob. I was making cases, and so I got to talk. I didn't talk to Bob, but I talked to Cindy Benedetto. So I
Okay.
would talk to the people that were making cases for her. So I got to know them a little bit,
Hmm.
back then. And then Bob's book, which it seems so intimidating to a new builder.
That must
All
have
this
just that
information.
must have just come out. I think that just came out in the late '90s, didn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So this was '99. I was in Albuquerque.
So that was a new book when you just had started practically.
And then other instruments. I had well, I got to meet like friends of my father. Like he, being a mandolin player, he knew like Jethro Burns
Mhm.
and Tiny Moore. Guys like that would come over to the house. He would like perform with these guys. And I remember Tiny had this 5-string mandola, electric mandola, and I remember checking that thing out. And of course, that was a solid body thing.
Right.
I never got into that.
And so you just start like poking around inside these things with a mirror and trying to figure out what held them
Oh,
together, what made
the
them work.
first one I think was a Michael Hayden mandolin.
Okay.
Michael Hayden. I don't know if you know him. He's here in BC. He's a good friend of mine. He was a good friend of my father's. They played in a band together back in the early '70s,
Hmm.
and he went on to become, the greatest mandolin maker in the world, I think. And
Okay.
I got a hold of one of his mandolins and really checked it out
Hmm.
and saw that there were some things that he's doing I didn't know about.
Right. So this is when your mind started putting two and two together. You're reading Bob's book. You're checking out other instruments.
Yeah,
You started applying those things to your next builds.
yeah. So yeah, and then we moved to Wales, and I again, because of my wife, she wanted to be a part of the PhD program there. So I'm like, well, okay, I'll go. I got a work permit.
Okay.
It's easier to do that when you're Canadian, in the Commonwealth. So I could work other jobs. I got a little workshop in town, right in the town of Aberystwyth, it was called, the name of the town. And I started making mandolins pretty seriously there, actually.
Now wait a minute. So how many instruments into your career was this?
Or maybe
So
not a
you
lot.
got you make your first instrument, which is basically a coffin with strings on it, and you 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 get from Indonesia to uh, New Mexico, Albuquerque.
Yeah.
Then you wind up in Wales four mandolins later, and you
Yeah.
decide to open up your own shop.
Yeah. Well, I rented a spot, is basically what it was. I just rented a workspace in town. It was cheap. It was £40 a month. And it was in
I'm,
this cool old building. It was a really cool place.
I'm gonna share my screen for something real quick because here we go.
Hey, that's the place.
That's the place. I had seen that somewhere. I downloaded a bunch of pictures of things that I wanted to talk to you about. related to your instruments. And that's somewhere, I can't remember where I came across this picture, but I said, I gotta pull that down. So you're 4 instruments in, you open up your own shop to start making mandolins. I don't know how long this was after. How long were you in Wales?
5 years.
Oh, okay. So I don't know how long into the 5 years this was. Looks like you got an F style there.
It's a weird thing. I don't, for the life of me, I don't remember ever making an F style mandolin, but there it is.
Well, there's photographic evidence of it.
Yeah, it's really weird. Yeah.
So you really jumped in to the deep end of the pool here, because 4 instruments in, to have the cojones to open up your own shop in a far off land that,
Yeah,
I don't know how big the mandolin is in Wales.
not very big, but well, honestly, I think this sounds bad, but I think self-deception had a lot to do with it. I really, really thought I was good at this.
Well, you are now, so
there was no evidence.
You were right. Either that or you were prophetic.
maybe. But I was lucky. There was a place opened up just down the road from me. It was called Opportunity Wales, helping Welsh businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I'm a Welsh business. So I went in there and I told them what I did, and they said, "Well, where do you see yourself promoting your instruments?" And I said, "Well, I guess Japan and France and Finland." I was just kind of thinking of places where people maybe had money. That's kind of what I was thinking.
As opposed to where people had mandolins.
Yeah, I didn't really know about that. That would have been like Tennessee and Kentucky, really. I didn't. So they sent me to these places. I made a couple of trips to Tokyo,
mm-hmm.
where I was basically a door-to-door mandolin salesman.
Oh my goodness!
And I had no translator. I had nothing. So I had a man. This is before. So
you were bringing some of your work in tow with you? You had a couple of completed mandolins or something?
A couple of mandolins. Going around to the shops, and they were so nice to me. And I sold a couple.
Okay.
And then I went to Paris, and didn't have as much luck there. It was really hard. I don't know. Paris is tough. Finland was great. Never have I been to a country where I just met so many friends.
Mm-hmm.
Finland was just amazing, and the musicians there were just so intimidating. They're just so good. It's a country of 4 million people, but every musician you see is you just can't believe it. Just blows your head off.
Wow.
So that was cool. And I met this sort of Finnish rockabilly band, became really good friends with them, and traveled with them around the country in their band. And they taught me all about Finnish music that they liked. Like there's a kind of Finnish polka that I still listen to all the time in the shop. It's just beautiful stuff.
Hmm. You were in Wales for 5 years, and right at the beginning, you got involved with this outfit that would send you to far-flung places to become a traveling mandolin salesman.
Yeah.
I think this is incredible. I think this is fantastic.
And I would go to London too, because London was easy to get to.
Right.
So I would go there in a couple of music shops. Ivor Moraitz. I don't know if you've heard of Ivor Moraitz, the English guitarist.
Okay.
Jazz guitarist.
Yeah.
The 1950s. He had a shop. And
he had like a retail shop where he sold instruments.
Yeah, and his manager, and he has a shop there now called Max, Macs.
Mm-hmm.
Max. His name is Mac Ogawa, and he was so nice, so encouraging. You meet these people who just kind of, along the way, people who, put you down. They hate you for, you don't know why. But then, every once in a while, somebody likes you and they want to help you. He was one of them.
Okay.
Very encouraging.
In these trips, you started getting orders for instruments.
Yep.
and then you'd go back to Wales and fill those orders and presumably ship them out. And this is where you got your start
Yeah,
as an instrument maker. You just
for
dove
sure.
in and started doing it. And how many instruments in would you say in the at least in the mandolin world? Because at that point you hadn't made any guitars.
No, I had sort of started and stopped on several. On an Archtop, I started and stopped. I made a Selmer McAfee type, and I just kind of didn't. It never grabbed me.
Right.
It was always mandolins. I just loved them.
Well, it was because it was the instrument you played. That was the instrument you had an affinity.
Yeah, yeah, it was in the blood.
So how many instruments in would you say you were? Because you were making, and we saw a picture of you with an F style that you say you don't even remember making an F style. So I'm presuming you were making more A style mandolins as time went
Yeah,
on. How many instruments in would you say it was before you started to really get it in terms of feel?
yeah, that's a good question. Well, I was making my own design mostly. It was like a 2-point asymmetrical design that I sort of got from D'Angelico mandolin that I saw that I really liked, and some A models. And I remember not getting it. Carving. To me, the biggest part of this is the carving, the relationship between the top and back.
Okay.
That to me, that's the meat and potatoes of it. That's how this thing works. As a machine. I now have this mental image in my head about how the relationship works. But then I really didn't get it, and I didn't know when to stop carving. Um, Through the whole stay in Wales, 5 years, I tried different ways. I did the Roger Simonoff thing. I read a lot about how he did it and the notes that he got from Lloyd Lohr. And, I tried to do it like that for a couple of years, and I kept really detailed notes. And I remember one day I just thought, this is just a bunch of nonsense. So I
Well,
decided, just screw it.
from the standpoint of in your perception of dealing with um and you and I talked a little bit on the phone about this, how for all intent and purposes a mandolin, especially in the style that you're talking about, is
Yeah,
virtually very much like an archtop guitar that was left in the dryer for too long.
yeah,
A mini
it is.
version of it. And so if you're talking about carving a top, and for you the nexus of how good that instrument is going to be and is in the carving. That is, it's one of those things that it's a completely reductive act because you're starting with a bigger piece of wood that you're making a smaller piece of wood, and you're removing material. And there's a point where you have to decide you can't remove anymore, or you shouldn't remove anymore. That's
Yeah,
what I mean by reductive, and knowing when to stop, like
sure.
you said, you know.
Absolutely.
So, so you're in Wales. How many instruments would you say you made when you were in Wales?
I tried to count. I think it was 40, 44, something like that.
Okay. So how many going back to my other question about how many instruments in would you, if you were to think about it, how many instruments into that 40 some odd instruments did you feel that you started to get it?
I didn't get it yet.
Really? Okay.
No, I felt like I was getting something. I was getting better at everything. But that part of it, I just really didn't get until I met Bob.
Okay.
That's what did it.
Benedetto.
Yeah.
So is that what pulled you away from Wales?
No, I actually we moved back. My son was born there in Wales,
Okay.
and we decided, well, it's time to go back. My wife got her PhD, and we stayed another year. And we thought about maybe staying there, but let's go back. We moved back to California, where she's from,
Okay.
and I was in Northern California. And once again, I had little jobs, and I opened up a shop, in a storage unit. Went back to making instruments. And what happened was I was trying to make a logo. I've never been able to. My initials are WWW. And you think that with that, you could just make an incredible logo,
Right.
but I never could. So, I remember, Bob Benedetto's got a great logo, it's just that handwritten Benedetto. It was great.
This is about what time? When did you go back to California?
2006.
Okay. So yeah, WWW. All you're missing was the dot.
Yeah, I know. I could have copyrighted it. Imagine the royalties that would be pouring in.
Right.
But I saw he had a website, and he had just moved to Savannah, and he needed workers. And I remember saying to my wife, wouldn't it be great to be Bob Benedetto's apprentice? Wouldn't that? Well, it's never going to happen, but wouldn't that be great? So she actually called him. So I wouldn't have. I just thought, nah, it's just a dream, wouldn't happen.
This was just after he opened up his Savannah shop.
Right when he opened it up, yeah.
Yeah.
And so she called him, and then he said, yeah, we'll tell him to get a, portfolio together, send it to me, I'll have a look. So I got my best photographs together, and I took photos of some jigs that I made and some nice instruments. I put it in a little photo album. I sent it to him. And he called back and he said, yeah, well, if you want to come out, for an interview, you can do that. So I was like, okay, let's just,
You just wanted to ask him about a logo.
It's like, let's just have a vacation in Savannah. It's kind of a nice place. People say it's a nice place to visit.
Okay.
So I met with him, had lunch with him, and we just kind of hit it off. We just kind of saw things the same way. We, had some laughs. He was just a great guy, obviously. And yeah, it just kind of worked. And he said, well, if you want to come and, work in my shop with me, you can do it.
Hmm.
And I thought, oh my God. So I went back to my wife and I said, well, we're moving to Georgia.
And she was obviously responsive to that.
Yeah, well, I know she was for it. Yeah. So we did that. And then I just started in, and it was hard work, but I was ready for it.
And at that point, you're building guitars.
Yeah, it's just all Archtop guitar. Well, we rented a house, and I built mandolins in the garage.
Okay. And
I would often use, and Bob didn't know this, but I would often use the same type of wood that he used, like on his Sinfonietta models. He used sometimes koa or some exotic woods, and I would make sort of a companion mandolin to these guitars that we were making in his shop.
Okay.
And selling them. So yeah, still doing mandolins, so long days, 10 days with Bob, and then I'd go home and work. And he had that old world work ethic.
Hmm.
I mean, this is no nonsense. You're working. This is serious, And but that's what I wanted to do. I was doing everything. He just threw everything at me: carving nicks, inlays. I could do some of the design. And what I was making is was Manhattans, his Fratellos, the custom orders, the Sinfoniettas, the Cremonas.
This was the high end stuff. This was the
Yeah. So it was just me and Bob doing that stuff.
Okay, and they had they had the lower cost production models being made elsewhere in the factory then.
Yeah, those guys were in the back. There were about 12 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they were making the Bravos, the Bambinos, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so this is where you cut your teeth in the guitar world.
Yeah.
So what did that experience? What did that experience not only? So you took the opportunity that just presented itself to jump in the guitar world. Did you have any desire before that to start building guitars, or was it just?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a fan of the Archtop guitar. I'm a jazz fan.
Right.
Love, especially early jazz since I was a kid.
Right.
And it's a beautiful instrument. The Super 400, I've always thought was just work of art.
Right.
And Bob's instruments are just so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Just pictures of them in his book. Color photographs, and they're just just beautiful works of art.
Right.
But what really this is a turning point, actually. I don't know if I've told anybody this before, but one of the mandolins I made during my time with Bob, I had 2 weeks off, and I went to California to visit some family, and I went to Griffin and Frank Ford,
Mm-hmm.
and I showed it to him. He had sold a couple of my instruments in the past, and I showed him this one, and I thought it was really something special. It was a weird design. It was koa. The bridge was koa. The binding was koa. It had turquoise, and I slid it over to him. He opened it up. He closed it. He pushed it back, and he's like, "Nah, nobody wants this. What is this? I can't sell this." You know. And I'm like, oh my God, I was like getting punched in the stomach. And to be perfectly honest, I was kind of mad at him. Like for a while. For a while, I was kind of mad at him. And then I got back to Savannah, and I told Bob about it. I said, I took this mandolin of mine into Frank Ford. He said this. Can you believe it? And Bob said, "Yeah, of course I can believe it. Who the hell are you? What? What do you think the world is just waiting for your genius inventions? And it really, really knocked me down to size and made me think. It sounds mean, but I think it was really helpful.
Okay.
Bob, eventually he said, you got to think about who you're making these for. You're making these for musicians. You have to give them what they want. This isn't about you.
Right.
And he said, it's an exaggeration, but it's basically true.
Yeah, because you're making an instrument for somebody else to sit with, and make music with. It becomes their guitar. Your name's on it.
Yeah.
But if you're making it to satisfy your own ends in terms of, then just keep it.
Well, I just it made me realize I can learn a lot from people, like some other builders like Bob, and people like Frank Ford, but musicians as well, like guys who would come into the shop when I worked for Bob. Howard Alden would come in, and
Right.
Jimmy Bruno. I met Jimmy Bruno there for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
He came in talking to guys like that, making guitars for guys like that.
Right.
And why is Bob making these guitars this way? And then starting to learn like how these things work. That's kind of where that started, and just doing it every day, and guitar after guitar.
Sure.
It was really the experience.
Right.
And
made it happen. You were building. How long were you at Bob's shop?
I was only there for 2.5 years, but I made, I guess, around 70 Archtops.
That's a lot in 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it anymore. I was like, I can't keep this up. So and I felt like I was ready to go out and start something.
Yeah.
On my, I built with, those plus the mandolins. I've made over 100 instruments at this point.
Right. And was it at that time were you doing the kind of volume you were doing at Benedetto that you started to feel like there's something here that you were understanding what was going on with these instruments in your head?
Yeah.
And that's when you decided not only could you keep up with the volume that you were trying to do, but you wanted to go out and make your mark on the world.
Yeah, I wanted to stop making somebody else's guitars.
Okay.
Because I started to have ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Started to make Bob's guitars a little different than he might have wanted them.
Right.
And maybe I shouldn't have done that.
Did you? I'm presuming you had conversations about that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I got called into the office a few times.
So after a couple and a half years at Bob's, what did you decide to do then?
Well, we were kind of wondering, well, where can we move now? And I was born on Vancouver Island, and I'd always wanted to go back because it just in my mind it seemed like the ultimate paradise.
Mm-hmm.
And we had one kid, and my wife was pregnant again. So we thought, let's pick a place, stay there forever, raise the kids, and that's what we did. And we found this beautiful spot here, kind of north part of the island. We're right on the water.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, the real estate prices were pretty low, so we were able to do it.
Yeah.
And I just got my shop here, like in what would have been a one-car garage. And I just got to work. And I immediately got some work.
You got some work by getting orders.
Yeah, I mean, just words getting out. And like I made a couple of mandolins right off the bat. And then I heard from a couple, oh God, I can't remember, maybe a couple of people in Oregon I made Archtop guitars for. And then Ed Sherry called me.
Oh, okay.
Because he had heard good things about me.
Mm-hmm.
And I made him a guitar maybe 15, 17 years ago, maybe was the first one.
It was about 2009, 2010, somewhere in there.
Yeah, 2009. Yeah, you're right, 2010. So 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And he just loved it. And he still, to this day, it's his favorite guitar. When I ask him about it, he says it feels like home.
He's a phenomenal musician. He's one of the most underrated guitar players out there, I think.
I just love him. I think it's because he doesn't push himself. He just plays. He'll play anywhere. He plays all the time.
Right.
And he just doesn't really. He doesn't really seem to care about that kind of promotional part of it.
Well, I think plus he had spent so many years in residence with Dizzy's band, it almost becomes like an institutional band that he had a safe space to be, to play.
Yeah.
Those Dizzy's band for the longest time, and he had all of the same guys touring with him and recording with him for so many years there, that somebody like Ed could make a name for himself. And then by the time he graduated from that, after Dizzy left all of us, it's like he could just decide to play, but yeah, he's a phenomenal musician. So you started you started at that point. Was guitar becoming more? How would you say you make more guitars than mandolins, or vice versa?
Oh, by far.
So
I make very few mandolins anymore.
Okay. So the guitar thing became your main thing.
It totally took over. I got obsessed with it. Absolutely obsessed. I think it's the only way you can do it is if you just become just crazy, insane, obsessed with it.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't see another way.
So since then you've been working in your shop. It's been described to me, the area that you're luthing in, as possibly one of the most beautiful places on the planet by people I know who have been there.
Think so.
It's kind of off the beaten path, is it not?
It is. Yeah, it's becoming more popular.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, a lot of people from Vancouver, people are being priced out of Vancouver, so they're coming over.
Right.
And people from Alberta, for the same reasons, are coming over.
Right.
But it's fine. It's now we have nicer restaurants, and
okay.
because of that. So that that's good.
But is it a big? It's not a big. It's not a big music place, is it?
No, it's not. It's kind of a, if you go into a pub, you're going to be hearing classic rock, kind of pretty much. Which, yeah, I don't, personally, I've had enough of that for my life.
If you decide you're gonna leave a factory like Bob's, to go build guitars for a living, you want to move as far away from the music scene as you possibly can, I guess.
Well, Bob was a little confused about that too, and he said, "Well, I guess there's FedEx." And I mean, I was worried about it, but then it seemed to have worked out.
Mm-hmm. So when you left there and started building guitars in your own shop, did you have an idea of what you wanted to achieve with the instruments? Did you outside of just not being able to keep up with the volume of cranking them out in a production setting, what else was the motivation for doing them one at a time?
I wanted to understand it better. That was truly what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to meet a musician and give them what they want.
Mm-hmm.
That's been my goal. To understand it enough to be able to do that. To talk about it with a player in an honest way, and be able to come up with something that is perfect for them.
Right.
And so that's been my goal, and I've been pretty successful, I think, and more so as I get more experience.
Your guitars are fantastic. I wanna share my screen again because I wanna switch gears here a little bit and talk about the instruments themselves. So if I can, how do I do this? So I grabbed a bunch of pictures.
Yeah.
And as we go through them, we can talk about them. These are some of your guitars. You you've described yourself, and we're going to go through a few pictures here. But I've heard you describe yourself as a traditional guitar builder.
I think I am. Yeah, I really do.
Um,
And look at those. Those are very traditional.
Those are, well, to a degree, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You've got here what are more traditional designs. I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but this is a smaller one here. This looks like a 15-inch. Is that
14? That one.
okay? So you got 14 going all the way up to 18 at the other end here, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So you're 14-inch. You got a 16-ish inch. You got a 17-inch. You got an 18-inch. I know you call one of them Northern Flyers, and from our conversation earlier, now I know why. I think.
Yeah, I started out from my father's bluegrass band. I had a mandolin that I made that I called the Northern Flyer, and then I had a customer who wanted me to make an Archtop guitar in that style.
Okay.
So that's how it always works. Like all of these, well, except for my Paramount and my Northern Flyer, which I just designed as a 17 and 16-inch guitar that I had to have when I started out.
Mm-hmm.
I just designed them, I made them, but everything else comes from special orders, and I love designing guitars. I think I'm really good at it. It's something I can do. So I have like the first one, the 14-inch, was
that's up here.
That was made for a player in China who had very specific needs. So I designed it. I made it for him. The second one, I think the first one of that design. It's called my Metro model.
Okay.
First one I made was for Tim Lurch.
Okay. Yeah, Tim's a great player.
He wanted a certain kind of thing. And then the next one was my sort of attempt at, the old L5 from the 20s and 30s.
Right.
Real traditional thing. And then,
what do we got over here?
that is my Prima model. And I made that, when did I make that first? Or maybe for Peter Bernstein.
Okay.
Because I got to know Pete a little bit when on a trip to New York, Ed Sherry took me around New York, took me to see some music. I got introduced to Pete Bernstein, and just like what a wonderful guy he is, and what a great player. And I feel like we really hit it off. And a few years ago, I noticed that, his Zeidler is the only guitar he has. So I just wanted to have like a backup for him. I noticed it had been in the shop a lot. Pieces were falling off. So talking to him, talking to his guitar tech, Pablo Valle, in New York, who was a friend of mine, we kind of tried to make the perfect guitar for Pete.
Okay.
And he's played. He's been out with it, and so far so good.
Okay, and then what do we got over here?
So that's the Paramount. That's the first guitar I designed, and it was really difficult because I tried to make sort of like a one of the later L5s, or kind of like a Manhattan,
Like a big 17-inch guy.
a big 17-inch, and it was really difficult to get away from Bob's designs because I was so intimate with every aspect of building Bob's guitars. I knew all the shapes, the cutaways, everything about them, and I started to think of them as being perfect.
Right.
Like Bob's been refining these for 40 years. They're just perfect in every way. So it was really hard for me to get away from that and then make my own 17-inch. But I eventually was able to do it. And I like how it has some Benedetto influence.
Yeah.
I like that. But it's certainly my own design.
Sure. And then you got your Northern Flyer over here.
And then, no, that's the Atlas.
Oh, that's the Atlas.
Yeah, that's the 18-inch Atlas. And I think that's Ed Cherry's Atlas.
I think something happened to your audio. I don't know what's going on there.
Oh, you can't hear?
Yeah, it seems to have dropped a bit.
Can I turn up the volume, you think?
There we go.
Well, somebody turned on a lawnmower out back.
Oh, that's what I thought it was. All right, so that's that. But then I want to look here and talk about this, because you call yourself a traditional guitar builder. These look far from traditional to my eyes.
These are all custom orders. The first one, I call it it's 15-inch non-cutaway.
Mm-hmm.
I call it the Petite Fleur. So it's such a cute little guitar,
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful little thing. And I made it originally for a Celtic musician who liked Archtop guitars, and who also sings. So having an oval sound hole, to me, takes away the focus and projection of a traditional Archtop guitar.
Right.
And it kind of opens things up, and suddenly you have more sort of harmonics, which I think is good for a singer. It just kind of fills things in more. If that makes sense. That's my thinking.
Mm-hmm. And what do we got here?
And then the middle one was made for a different Celtic musician in Nova Scotia. And that was a carved top flat back instrument. And again, the idea with that was to take away projection and add more sort of colors and overtones, which I think worked really well.
And this?
And this was just a traditional, I think, Archtop jazz guitar. It works in the same way. I think when you have sound holes on either side of the bridge, or F holes or whatever, you get that focus, and balance. So that's just what that was, in a slightly different style that the person wanted.
Right. And then you got these three down here.
The Northern Flyer was one
That's
that I just designed before anybody asked me to. No, actually, no. That was the one that came after the mandolin. That's right. Yeah, that grew out of the mandolin, Northern Flyer.
So this is the guitar version of your mandolin.
Yeah, that's right. Sometimes I forget the history.
And here,
that's actually a 5-course mandocello.
This here is the mandocello, yeah.
Yeah. And I so badly wanted to make it coffin shaped, but the guy just wouldn't go for it. He just wouldn't go for it.
Something's happening to your audio again. I don't know what that is.
Is that any better?
It's just I can still hear you. It's just for some reason the bottom dropped out of it. I'm not sure why. Is your battery still doing good?
Let's see, how can I check now?
Oops, we lost you.
So you think it's probably gonna last, right?
All right, so let me just go here now.
Oh man,
This looks far from traditional to me.
I learned how to make traditional Archtops. To a very large degree, I feel like I know how they work. So with that knowledge, I feel like I have the freedom to make sort of different designs that still work like jazz guitarists would want. Like the first three, the top three were made for guys who are not professionals, but quite good jazz guitarists.
Okay.
The one on the left was made for a guy who just plays at home. He plays in a room, he doesn't go out. So he didn't want any sound holes on the top.
Wow. Okay.
It just has 2 sound holes on the side.
Yeah, I think I have some pictures of that coming up.
And that worked really well.
And what do we got here in the center?
And that one was, again, for somebody who doesn't play out. And that has a side sound port. And I made that one before I made the one with no sound.
Okay.
So I don't know. I think people study this stuff, they can talk about it scientifically, but I just see it as redirecting the sound.
Well, I see this as a projection of an aesthetic that is unique that I've seen to your instruments. I don't see a whole lot of this going on in a lot of Archtop guitars.
No, I mean, I kind of have just developed it over many years. I think well, the Northern Flyer mandolin, actually, I have to be honest, Bob asked me to design that mandolin for him.
Okay.
He wanted to have a mandolin in his line of instruments. The back, well, obviously, when I was working for him.
Right.
So I started working on it, and I came up with what is now pretty much my Northern Flyer mandolin.
Mm-hmm.
And then I showed it to him when I had it done. And he's like, "What do you?" I said, "What do you think?" He said, "Oh, it looks great." Well, I mean, do you think? Do you think it's we can use it?
We're not.
He's like, "What?" He's like, "What?" Like, you were talking about you wanted to, add a mandolin. He's like, "Oh, I don't want to do that." No, I gave up on that idea. So I'm like, so I just took it for my own.
Here's some mandolins.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just like custom stuff, that I make for people. Couple of guitars in there.
Yeah.
The top right, I love that guitar so much.
Top
I
right.
made it for Meredith Axelrod. You know Meredith?
No, I don't.
Meredith is San Francisco
Okay.
musician,
Mm-hmm.
and she sings, music from the 1920s and 30s, and so she plays this guitar, and it has the 4 sound holes,
Mm-hmm.
so it has a great evenness to it, but it just has
That's
the
this one
added
down here.
harmonics to her singing.
That's this one down here.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I had an apprentice when I was making that guitar. I briefly had an apprentice, and she was looking at me like, "What the hell are you doing?"
So I'm going to go through some stuff here. Some more pictures of guitars. That's beautiful, by the way.
Oh, thanks. I love that. Yeah, I loved a curved centerpiece.
Yeah. That must have taken some doing.
Well, I really figured out a good way to do it, so it's not that bad.
So here's that style of sound hole again. Now this is you've carved this away. This is relieved from the overall
Yeah, yeah. I just got into that, and I just can't be stopped.
There's another picture of this one.
To be honest, I think a lot of it is outside influence. From where I live, there's a lot of indigenous art,
Mm-hmm.
um, mask carving, totems,
Right.
things like that all around, and it just kind of makes its way in. I don't copy anything, but it just is certainly an influence. I don't see how it couldn't be.
Here's
If
the
you,
one
if you
with
know
the
what I mean.
sound holes.
Hey, did you ever have
And this here, um,
Yeah.
there's the sound holes on the side. You got some sound ports.
Yeah.
Rufus.
After the Rufus hummingbird inlay.
Okay. This is a 7-string,
Yeah, I got that one right behind me here. Yep. Still working on it.
14-inch.
Yeah. That's going to Montreal soon.
I'm not going to let my wife see that one. Okay, here's this is the picture I was looking for. This is what you carving one of those sound holes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you design these, you're just starting with a pencil and a piece of paper.
Yeah, that's what I do. I wouldn't know how to do it on a computer. And it got to this is a good example because I did this one very recently, just a couple of days ago. And I just do it on cardboard. I draw it on cardboard. And this one, I had it first try. I just drew it and I'm like, that's good enough. It took me about 10 seconds.
Hmm.
And then I cut it out and then I traced it onto the wood and I thought, I think it's good. I mean, how can I improve this? So then I went ahead and I cut it out and I started carving it. I love it.
So here I saw a post recently of some of your mandolins. Here are all the instruments that you are French polishing. Is that your primary finish on all of your instruments?
It was for a long time. I started out with nitrocellulose lacquer, and then through Bob taught me French polishing because he would do it on some of his Sinfonietta, like the really high end stuff he would do, and he showed me how he did it, and I got into that.
Okay.
And I started doing it a lot, and then for maybe 10 years, I did it on all my instruments: Archtop guitars, mandolins. And then I got to the point where maybe I had 6 orders, 6 guitars. I'm like French polishing. I'm like, oh, I can't do this. This is just too time consuming.
Right.
So I started to spray the shellac,
Oh, okay.
and so I did it pretty much like you would a lacquer finish, but with shellac. And then I would fine sand it, and then just do the final sort of like glaze coats they would call them by hand. and then rub it out. Still a lot of work. And then that was around that time when, I got put in the hospital because of cancer.
Mm.
And it was a really bad experience. I had major surgery, chemotherapy, and the chemo must have changed my chemistry somehow, because I couldn't stand being around any kind of chemical smells. I couldn't be around super glue. I couldn't be around alcohol, hand sanitizer. I couldn't do it. So that made things difficult. But I had a friend of mine from Benedetto Guitars who said that he could do the finishes for me.
Okay.
So he started doing nitro finishes for me.
Oh, okay.
And it's great. It was kind of like getting the old band back together, because, I was making Bob's guitars and Matt was, finishing them. So
This
we
is Matt
started doing that
Eady?
again. Matt Eady. Yeah.
So Matt Eady's doing your finishes now.
Yep.
Right.
Well, most of them. I still do French polishing. I was able to, after a few years, I was able to get back into, and I could be around alcohol again. So then I started. So now I do French. I do French polishing, and I do violin varnishes.
Okay.
But only on mandolins. I don't do it on guitars anymore.
So here we got a back that you're carving.
Yeah.
So this is we got some instruments in process here, and then with the funky sound holes. When I see
Ron Jackson guitar.
this is Ronnie Jackson's guitars.
Yeah, it's the Ron Jackson model.
That's a big guitar.
18 inches, 7 strings.
Wow.
Man, he loves it.
I bet. Both Sharon and I are 7 stringers, and that's
You would love
I like a guitar you can hug. Sure.
it.
So we got another Northern Flyer here.
Yeah, I always hated having to put a rectangular pickup at the end of a curved fretboard.
Mm-hmm.
So just on a whim, I called up Kent Armstrong.
Yeah.
And asked him if he could do it, and he said, "Sure. Just send me." He sent me the dimensions. It has to fit in this kind of box, and put the string spacings. And then he said, make a model of it from curly maple, like really nice figure. So I did that, and then he made the mold for the pickups using my curly maple master. So the end product of his, it's black epoxy, but it looks like it's curly ebony.
Right.
They're really beautiful pickups.
I think here's a picture of you drawing one.
Yeah. That might have been for the mandolin. I'm making a blue mandolin for the Archtop Foundation people.
Oh, okay. For the blue guitar foundation.
Yeah, kind of a companion mandolin.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about this.
Oh, yeah.
I gotta tell you how it took 60 years for somebody to figure out how to do this.
Really?
Oh my God. You know how many times, like, I don't know if people know what we're looking at here. This is you're designed for an end pin for a Saucony.
Yep.
How many times, I've seen Archtop guitars with a Saucony put on the end pin wrong, or have to come in where they're pulling up because people are putting their Saucony around where the strap should go and all that kind of thing. And,
I know you've seen a lot of that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. But you came up with this, and these are being produced now, or are you producing these?
Yeah, a friend of mine who's a machinist makes them for me.
Okay, and they're being sold through Allied, aren't they?
Yep.
Yeah. So this is genius. Why it took this long for somebody to figure this out is beyond me.
Yeah, I mean, I was using different things, like Bob he would wrap it around the actual jack,
Hmm.
a lot of the times, and he would put epoxy in the threads. And I always thought, that's kind of cheesy, It's like, and then there were those rings. There was like a double ring
Right.
for a Saucony and a guitar strap, and I never liked those. They just didn't seem to really work that well.
Right.
So I just thought of this, like, what do I need? What do I want? And I just came up with this. My machinist friend was like, yeah, that's easy. I can make those. And so, yeah, it's got the separate ring.
Hmm.
I just decided that I'm not going to plug in to the end anymore. I put the jack sort of like, underneath the guitar
Right.
now.
Yeah.
I just decided that's what I'm going to do. But I love how it's just such a solid anchor for the tailpiece. I never really trusted a jack for that kind of tension,
Now, is this threaded so that this could be threaded onto a jack with these threads or no?
Yes, it can be.
So if you're using like a switchcraft style jack that looks like this, you could put this on the outer end here, this one on here.
Yes, I have two different kinds. There's one that fits on a switchcraft, and there's one that fits on seems like anything that's not switchcraft.
Right. Yeah, but this was great when I saw this. This was like, I couldn't figure out why somebody hadn't thought of this before.
Oh man, I'm glad somebody appreciates it. I thought it was great too. But it's just been like a chorus of crickets.
Right.
But that's fine. I made them for myself, and then I thought, it'd be nice to have my name on something. So and Allied Lutherie, those guys are great.
Mm-hmm.
They're so positive, and they were excited about it, and I just really like those guys.
So here's your side bender.
Oh yeah, I've made, God, how many of those have I made? I think I made about 5 of them.
Right.
God, they're a pain in the ass to make. But yeah, the springs, that's the main thing. When you're cranking down into the cutaway,
Mm-hmm.
you need the support of those springs, or a little crack. So yeah, oh yeah, these things work so well.
This is the way they made them over at Benedetto.
Yeah, and I made a couple for him for new models. So that's where I kind of got the experience for making them. And they're a lot like the Fox shop benders.
And there we got Mr. Cherry right there.
So yeah, that's the first guitar I made for him. Which yeah, he's still. I saw him use it the other night.
Oh, very cool.
I actually heard from Ed today.
Oh, okay.
Talking about yet another guitar.
Oh, that's what you want to hear.
It's crazy, but I actually do like to hear about that stuff.
So, do you want to do a little shop tour?
Okay, yeah, I'll just kind of go around and let's see if I can switch this around.
If anybody's got questions for Wyatt while we're doing this, I've monopolized his time. But if anybody's got any questions for Wyatt,
is anybody there?
Yeah, there's still people here. Sure.
Yeah, we're here.
We're here.
Let's see. How do I flip this around? I don't see anything to flip it around now.
If you tap the screen somewhere, you should see a little camera icon with a with two arrows around it.
Little flipper. Yeah, I got a couple arrows. Doug, do you want me to remove your spotlight?
Yeah, remove my spotlight.
Yeah, I'm not finding that.
Press on the screen, and it's usually in the upper left-hand corner.
Hey, I got it.
There we are.
Okay, so here, yeah. Here's I just got crap everywhere. I'm pretty organized, but I have a very small space. So I got a lot of molds. I do a lot of custom stuff. So I have to make I make really simple molds. I don't spend a lot of time on them. A couple of mandolins, French polishing, or molds. Just bent the sides for that one. Here's that blue mandolin. It'll be blue eventually.
Okay.
Here's a bunch of up and coming guitars.
Are one of these the Jimmy Bruno model?
Yes. This one, the first one.
Okay.
That's Jimmy Bruno. And then this is one for Taylor Roberts,
Okay.
7-string guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then just kind of random stuff.
How did your association with you? When did you start working with Jimmy to come up with a Jimmy Bruno model?
Well, I first met him at Benedetto Guitars years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and then I got to know him at the Rocky Mountain show.
Okay.
And he just gravitated towards my guitars and just, loved them. And then I was just on a 3-way call with Ted Ludwig. I talk to Ted a lot. Ted and I are really good friends. We spend a lot of time talking on the phone. And Ted likes to invite other people on. So we were talking with Jimmy as well. And it just kind of came up, like, hey, why don't we do a Jimmy Bruno model?
Okay.
And that's how that happened. Because Roger had just discontinued his, Roger Sadowski.
I wasn't aware that had happened. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then, Roger called me up, and I had kind of an awkward conversation with him. I don't know if he felt like I was stepping on his toes, but I don't know. I don't think I am.
Well, Roger's been in this business long enough that his toes are fine.
I think so. And they're different guitars anyway. Like his is a laminate guitar. Mine's a fully carved Archtop.
Mm-hmm.
So here's these two guys. Two 14-inch.
1.6, 1.7.
Yeah. So those are getting ready to go. Here's a bending press that I'm using.
Okay. So you had mentioned to me that at one time you were doing guitar building classes.
Yeah, I want to get back to it. I just don't have any time right now.
But you said at one time you had 8 guys in your class, right?
No, it's 4 guys.
Oh, 4 guys. I still
it was
can't see how you fit 4 people in there.
It was 4 Australian guys. It was more like 8 regular people. No, it was great. It was such a great time. There were just these big personalities. We really had a great time, and we got guitars out of all of them.
Hmm.
All 4 of them finished their guitars.
So if you spin back to look at where you were, no, yeah, back that way. So you got your bandsaw in the middle of the room there.
Yeah.
And you got a bench grinder and your bench sander. And if
spindle sander.
Okay.
Oh yeah. People like to see that stuff, huh? Belt sander.
All right.
That's what a great tool that is.
So you don't have a lot of tools. You're doing most of your stuff with small tools.
Yes.
Then just all the handwork.
I learned it that way. I figured for the first 18 years, I carved them completely by hand, like from 1-inch slabs. I just took planes and I just got good at it.
Right.
I got really good at it. There's a couple more over here.
So this is your main work area where you're doing most of your carving.
Yeah. This gets a big workout. And this spins around, and I can put inserts in it for mandolins, mandolas.
Okay.
There's some necks up there in progress, making a new mold, a new
So this
new
is
model.
what it must be like loothing in a submarine.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's my old phone that actually works. I had this phone in Aberystwyth with me over in Wales.
Oh my goodness.
That was my shop phone there too. A bunch of mandolin wood. Actually, I'll show you. Here's the guitar wood down here.
Okay. You're making good use of space there, boy.
Yeah. Oh, I got it. And then there's more.
Oh, okay.
Sort of the more heavy machinery is out here.
Oh, okay. You got an outbuilding for that stuff.
Yeah. The Wi-Fi might not be too good.
We'll see how we do.
Oh my God. Gotta mow the lawn. So, whoa.
This is bigger than your inside shop.
It might be bigger. Yeah. So I've got this nice drill press here. Another drill press here. This is where I make my tail pieces.
Okay.
I just use this jig for the holes. And then here's a drawing board.
All right.
Different designs.
Layout and designs.
Yeah, I usually just kind of sketch something out real quick. A big bandsaw.
Mm-hmm.
Resawing. I just recently got that. That's it. Love this bandsaw. Couple of cases ready to go. Main stage, you know those guys?
I don't know those guys.
They're in New Brunswick, and they got their hands on the original Calton molds. So they make them in the old Calton style, which I like, of course. Little router table.
Yeah.
There's a thickness sander, pretty heavy duty.
Oh, we lost your video.
Oh, it might be the Wi-Fi.
Take 2 steps back. Might have lost them altogether. Maybe his battery died.
There we go.
We're back.
No, the battery's good. I can see now. The battery's fine.
Okay. So I think we stepped too far for your Wi-Fi.
Well, that's too bad because Sandro's down there.
Who's down there?
My copy carver.
Let's go. Let's see if we can get closer. See how close we can get. So that's your copy carver.
This thing saved my career after my.
Uh-oh, you got to take 2 steps back again.
Such a hard time. So it's just like a pantograph carving machine, but it's automatic. And you'll see. So I put the pattern up top and then the piece of wood down here.
So you're rough cutting your tops and backs on there.
Just rough cut them, yeah. And I have to make all the patterns for for all my molds. I keep them up there.
Okay.
So, most of them. Yeah, just some more wood. I got some old cello wood here. It's really, really old stuff. Curly maple. Curly maple that I got from Steve Anderson when he closed up. He just kind of all of a sudden says, I've had it. I'm done. And I was lucky to get a call from him, and he said, come by and just grab a bunch of crap. So I got a lot of curly maple from him and big slabs of ebony. And God, he was great. And then, there's the spray booth.
Okay.
Which doesn't get a lot of use anymore.
Well, since you got Matt doing your finishes now, and the only stuff you're doing in house is French polishing, right?
Yeah, I gotta say, it's an addiction. Like once you send your guitars out and they come back, all kind of nice and shiny and perfect and ready to go. It's like, huh.
why wasn't I doing this for as long as I should have been?
Yeah, I mean, I had to do it though. I did it for a long time. 18, 20 years. I did all my finishing, and I thought, I deserve a break. Well, I think that's about it. Got a little machinist lathe there.
Oh, nice.
For end pins.
Right.
For certain guitars still I'll use an ebony end pin.
So how much time do you spend in one place versus the other? Do you spend your day walking back and forth?
Mostly indoors. And then, kind of come out here more than anything just to kind of set up the carver or use the router.
Mm-hmm.
So 90% of the time indoors.
Okay.
So it's kind of nice out.
It looks nice.
Yeah, a lot of green. There's some stuff I used to collect this kind of wood. I would find it on the beach that beavers had chewed on.
Right.
I love that kind of stuff. But all right, we'll go back in. This is a copy I'm doing of my blue guitar.
Okay. That's like that's what the relieved sound holes. You can't call them F holes, can you?
I got to come up with a name for that because I don't have a name for it. So yeah, I don't know. But yeah, that blue guitar thing has been fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that blue guitar collection is growing for sure.
Yeah, I was surprised they asked me. It was quite an honor, because the other guys, Chris Mirabella, Ken Parker, and me.
Sure.
Was like, okay.
Good company to be in.
Yeah. And Mario Beauregard. Oh man, have you seen his contribution?
I have not yet.
What a beautiful thing! Wow.
I haven't seen his in the collection yet.
But I think that's about it for the shop tour. Here's an old mandolin I made in Aberystwyth in Wales.
Oh my goodness.
So this is the kind of thing. This is maybe my 5th mandolin.
That was very short. Very shortly after you got to Wales, then, because you after 4 or 5 mandolins, you got to Wales.
Yeah.
It looks like
I feel like I got kind of good, kind of quick.
Well, it's still in one piece, so you would
exactly.
Do it, right?
It's kind of overly built. I think it's a little clunky. Oh, there's me and Bob.
Oh, there you go.
It's kind of the day I left, I think. And that was a guitar we made for Bucky.
Sure.
That was fun.
Do we know how to turn this back around so we can see you?
There we go.
We've got.
I can't believe I knew how to do that.
So you learn something new every day. Well, Wyatt, we've been at this for an hour and a half.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
time flies.
There must be a couple of guys sleeping.
No. So, what with your building? Somebody who's been in the career for as long as you have, you start to think about, you know, gearing up. You start to think about increasing production. You start to think about, making more guitars. Does those thoughts plague you, or you just this is where you're at?
I kind of have the idea of what I want to do is make fewer instruments and get more money for them.
That works.
Yeah. I used to just want to make guitars. I wanted to make guitar after guitar. I just wanted to just make guitars, as many as I could, for a long time. And I think that served me well. Because you need experience doing this. You really do. But I'm at the point now where I feel like I can do anything. I really do. I feel like I can make any guitar that I can think of.
Well, it seems to me that especially a lot of Archtop builders I've known, the longer they get into their career, the more it almost seems like the more standardized they want to become. That they sow their wild oats when they're younger, and then as they mature, they settle into this is this model, that's that model, and that's that model, and that's what I make. And then comes the job of figuring out how to increase production, how to increase your numbers, along with increase the price you're getting for your instruments. Where you seem to be embracing the opposite. You're the longer you've been doing this, you're embracing the creative part more as time goes on. Am I wrong about that? Oh, your audio is shot again. I don't know what happened to your audio.
Things I want to do.
You're gonna have to repeat that. I didn't hear a word you just said.
I said that the more I do it, the more ideas I have, the more guitars I want to make,
Mm-hmm.
the more design ideas I have, things that I know will work. And I'm lucky because people come to me with this stuff. They come to me knowing that I can do this, and they give me a lot of freedom.
Right.
So
So for you, it's about now you're looking at the next, the coming next 25 years, and it's not about producing more. It's about chasing those ideas, letting those ideas come to fruition, and
yeah, I more and more I like collaboration. I'm really enjoying collaboration.
with artists, you mean, with musicians.
Yeah, well, with musicians, I'm making this guitar with a cartoonist right now. I don't know if you saw that one.
Which one is that?
That's Robert Armstrong, the cartoonist, underground cartoonist.
Okay, I haven't seen.
He's also a musician. He plays with Archtop and the Cheap Suit Serenaders. Brilliant musician, brilliant cartoonist, and we're doing a guitar together.
Awesome.
So he's putting his illustrations on the inside and the outside of the guitar, and it's sort of like inspired by those cowboy guitars from the Depression, that they sold at Sears.
Right.
And they'd stencil on the cowboys, on a horse or around the campfire, and it would say, howdy pards or something like that. You've probably seen those.
Yeah, sure. So
it's
you're gonna,
kind of in that tradition, is what it is.
so he's going to be putting his art on the guitar?
Yeah. So
cool.
he's done it. So and then he's drawn the fingerboard inlays, which I'm cutting out. I'm using old coins and different materials for, a couple of stars, a steer's head, stuff like that.
Right. Okay.
So I love that kind of thing. I really do.
So that's what you're pursuing as the future for what it is you want to do rather than the other direction.
Yeah, I mean, I could see collaboration being a bigger part of it. Like, people that I just really admire. I'd love to work with them. Like Tom Rebecki.
Right.
Linda Manzer. Let's see, who's the guy I'm thinking of? Oh God, there's this one guy. He doesn't make Archtops, but he does Fraulini guitars. Fraulini.
Yeah.
God, I love that stuff that he does. Where he'll see an old photograph of Bonnie Johnson, and he'll research that guitar, and he'll find out what it was and how it was made, and he'll make one. Or Lydia Mendoza's 12-string. I get excited about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we wrap this up, if anybody has any questions for Wyatt, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Todd Cambio, that's the guy's name.
What's that?
Todd Cambio, that's the guy's name.
So Wyatt, I gotta know, did you ever get back to Koa with your turquoise inlays?
Back to
the Koa wood with your turquoise inlays?
Well, they go so well together. I've done it since then, but they have that reconstituted stone that you can get in sheets. You've seen that stuff?
Yeah.
And it's not actually turquoise, but it's dyed to look like turquoise. So I use that stuff. If that's what you mean.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of back to your roots.
Yeah. I think I did that recently. Yeah, some things just work well together, like koa and turquoise. The colors, natural, right?
So you're hand cutting most of your inlays then?
Most of them. I try to keep the ones that I do really simple, like the Art Deco stuff. Just simple to cut, simple to put together. But if I have a more complicated one, like a double eagle, 2 heads with its tongue sticking out, I get somebody to do that for me. I don't know. I just don't want to. I don't want to do that stuff anymore.
Well, Wyatt, unless anybody has any other questions, I think we're gonna let you go. We've had you almost for 2 hours here. I can't thank you enough.
No, it's fun. I never get to talk, so I was in here alone, and I just kind of maybe talk to myself a little bit.
Well, I've been an admirer of your work for quite some time, so this was a real treat for me.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks. Nice. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. We'll have to have you back to do some deep dive and some Archtop stuff.
I'd love to do that. Yeah, awesome. Get right into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So if everybody could unmute and thank Wyatt for joining us today. I can't thank you enough, Wyatt.
No, thanks,
Wyatt. That was great.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Thanks,
That's
Wyatt.
fantastic. Thanks to you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Come back.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks so much, Wyatt.